Cameron Poe's situation was utterly tragic. On what should have been a day of liberation from prison, his eagerness to reunite with his wife and daughter led him to board a plane transporting felons, hoping to get home in time for his daughter's birthday. However, unforeseen events were about to unfold. Just as the plane was about to take off, a group of convicts initiated a jailbreak plan, but the misfortune involving Cameron Poe didn't end there. Let's rewind to the beginning of the story. 8 years ago, Cameron Poe was an ex-soldier with visions of a happily ever after. However, one evening, under a torrential downpour, a few thugs came to provoke him and insulted his wife. Cameron, not one to look for trouble, instinctively responded. As a former member of the assault team, he quickly subdued the thugs, knocking down the leader with a single move. Unfortunately, the leader died, and that's how the accident happened. But the tragedy did not end there. The lawyer advised him to plead guilty and promised to reduce his sentence possibly to 4 years, or even just 1 year. Initially resistant, Cameron, thinking of his wife and unborn daughter, admitted to involuntary manslaughter. However, the final verdict was harsh. Due to his military training, the sentencing standards were different. His capability to kill with his combat skills meant he couldn't serve less than 7 to 10 years. And so, Cameron Poe was imprisoned. Day after day, year after year, his wife and daughter became his reasons to live. He watched his daughter grow up through photos plastered on his cell wall. Even within the confines of prison, he felt like the happiest man in the world. Beyond, his daughter started school, and communicating with her became a significant part of Cameron's life. Fast forward 8 years, Cameron Poe was granted parole, coincidentally on his daughter's birthday. Eager to see them, he boarded a plane designated to transport several high-risk inmates to a prison in Alabama. This flight was of significant concern, as it carried a notorious ensemble: William "Billy" Bedlam Bedford, known as a psychotic killer, and Nathan "Diamond Dog" Jones, a former black guerrilla leader who had bombed the National Rifle Association, were among the passengers. Cyrus the Virus Grissom, a man guilty of kidnapping, robbery, murder, and extortion, had spent 25 of his 39 years in prison. He was highly educated within those walls, earning degrees, including one in law. He killed 11 inmates, instigated 3 riots, and escaped twice. Cameron Poe boarded this flight in a hurry to get home. Even Agent Vince Larkin was worried before takeoff, hoping that gathering so many criminals on one plane wouldn't lead to disaster. But as the plane began to taxi, the prisoners set their plan into motion. One prisoner, known as Pinball Parker, managed to free himself using a hidden pin, signaling the start of their escape. Pinball Parker spits out a piece of string tied to a plastic bottle, then yanks out about half a meter, which Pinball Parker holds in his hand. Cyrus the Virus Grissom of the cage nodded. Then the unknown liquid sprayed its smoke. Then a match is lit, a fire starts in the plane, and the alert moves in quickly. Amidst the chaos, Pinball Parker took the female prison guard's keys. He unlocked the cells of fellow inmates, including Nathan "Diamond Dog" Jones, who ruthlessly killed a guard. Despite efforts to contain the situation, it was too late. Cyrus the Virus Grissom had already broken free and seized control of the plane, shooting down anyone in his path and eventually taking over the cockpit. Witnessing this, Cameron Poe was devastated.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Con Air.
Tears of regret streaming down his face. The prisoners were unshackled, and it was the guards who ended up handcuffed. Johnny 23 could hardly contain himself, and by the look on his face, it wasn't hard to guess that he was itching for action. At that moment, Cameron Poe stood up to stop him. Johnny 23 was about to continue his assault when Cyrus the Virus Grissom stepped in. Even the toughest criminals had someone they feared, and they all depended on Cyrus the Virus Grissom. The guards revealed that their next stop was Carson City, where 6 prisoners would disembark and 10 new ones would board. They planned to leave the plane as usual because true freedom required thinking ahead. And someone was footing the bill for all this, a major drug lord. As long as they rescued his son, they could enjoy a life of luxury abroad, while unlocking the shackles. An undercover DEA agent made his move. He held Pinball Parker hostage, demanding Cyrus the Virus Grissom to drop his gun. Cameron Poe tried to dissuade him, arguing it was too rash and that they would become hostages if they surrendered their weapons. But these people wouldn't kill without reason. However, the undercover agent was too green. He didn't wait for the right moment and tragically lost his life. Only Baby Odell knew that he had tried to save the undercover agent, which ironically made him a friend in the eyes of Cyrus the Virus Grissom. Pinball Parker encountered a problem in Carson City. 2 of the prisoners meant to leave the plane were accidentally killed, so replacements were needed. This presented a perfect opportunity, but Cameron Poe didn't want to miss a chance to save others. Of course, no prisoner wanted to volunteer, but with Baby Odell's persuasion, they became volunteers. Baby Odell was so worried about his certain death when he got off the plane that Cameron Poe assured him that he would yell and scream when he got off the plane, promising to keep it from taking off. The pilot, fortunate to be swapped out, had his mouth taped to prevent any outbursts, foiling Cameron Poe's plan.
I want to stay on.
What?
I got 15 years left and
So, Cyrus, we got a little mind changer.
an umbrella drink.
Due to his previous actions, Cyrus the Virus Grissom chose to trust him and found a white officer to replace him. His friend couldn't understand why, nor could the handcuffed female guard, but Cameron Poe didn't want to leave them behind. On the dead undercover agent, Cameron Poe finds the tape, which will be all that happened on the plane. Meanwhile, back in Cyrus the Virus Grissom's cell, authorities discovered plans for the plane and other incriminating documents hidden behind the wall. As the plane landed in Carson City amidst a dust storm, with guards only showing their eyes, Cameron Poe managed to sneak the tape recorder onto a guard, dressed in a guard's uniform. Cyrus the Virus Grissom led 6 prisoners off the plane, all hooded. Among the new prisoners were the planned pilot and the drug lord's son, Francisco Cindino. The inmates are confused. There are no longer any guards on the plane, and it feels like they've been transferred to another prison. All the new arrivals are excited, proceeding to remove the plane's tracking device. Pinball Parker was tasked with disposing of it and cleverly attached it to a tour plane. The last prisoner was improvised and Cyrus the Virus Grissom was shocked when he learnt the name of the inmate. This man was escorted alone. Not a very big man, but shackled all over his body, and all the felons were stunned. He was Garland Green, the Marietta Mangler.
Harassed in a cartoon.
Shit, that's Garland Green, man.
A Marietta Mangler.
That skinny little man butchered 30-something people up and down the eastern seaboard. They say the way he killed those people makes the Manson family look like the Partridge family.
Well, he's on the right flight.
Meanwhile, here at the prison, Agent Vince Larkin discovers secrets in the data. Agent Vince Larkin suddenly finds a Last Supper card with everyone's eyes gouged into square holes. Agent Vince Larkin held it up, realizing the holes spelled out the name of a city, Carson City. He suddenly understood there was a problem with the plane stopping there and rushed to inform the remaining officers. The 6 prisoners struggled, but Carson City guards didn't indulge them. A blow to a guard's recorder shattered it, alerting them to the situation. They moved the prison van and notified the police, but it was too late. Before a swarm of police cars could arrive, the plane prepared for an early takeoff. Pinball Parker, delayed by a flirtatious encounter, missed the flight to freedom. Chasing after the plane, he came face to face with Smoke, who had been burnt by him. Smoke smiled, and Pinball gestured as the plane flew towards freedom. The prisoners began to celebrate, while the DEA chief, enraged by the death of his undercover agent, who had been close to extracting information from the drug lord's son, arrived on the scene. The DEA chief had a heated argument with Agent Vince Larkin because he wouldn't allow his team to bring automatic weapons aboard the plane, but all the anger couldn't bring back the dead. Garland Green, a celebrity among the prisoners, was admired by everyone. Cyrus the Virus Grissom suggested releasing him, and Nathan Diamond Dog Jones cautiously unlocked his cell, approaching the notorious criminal that even the other inmates feared. Cameron Poe went to the cockpit, posing as a loyal prisoner, curious about the next step in their plan. When Agent Vince Larkin managed to make contact with the plane, it was clear that Cyrus the Virus Grissom had full control, but they couldn't gather any useful information. Cyrus the Virus Grissom informed Cameron Poe they were heading to Larner Airfield, a place with no police presence within 10 miles. Meanwhile, Tricia Poe, his wife, was brought to the airfield by federal marshals, as Cameron Poe had given the tape recorder to a guard, proving to Agent Vince Larkin that he was trying to help. Given Cameron Poe's U.S. Army Commando background and his performance on the plane, Agent Vince Larkin believes he is a member of the Allied forces. As attack helicopters arrived, the DEA chief was prepared to take down the plane. Nathan Diamond Dog Jones called Cameron Poe to check the landing gear. Cameron Poe was worried. Sensing Nathan Diamond Dog Jones's hostility, they found Pinball Parker's body hung underneath the plane. Nathan Diamond Dog Jones instructs Cameron Poe to drop Pinball Parker. Finally finding the opportunity, he quickly pulls out a pen and writes Agent Duncan Malloy's name on his suit in preparation for landing at Larner Airport. As Pinball Parker's body plummeted into a city, hitting a man's car during his date, Agent Vince Larkin was briefing Tricia Poe about Cameron Poe. Agent Vince Larkin receives a call from the Fresno Police Department when a body falls from the sky with Agent Duncan Malloy's name written on it, making him pretty sure that Cameron Poe is his ally. Agent Vince Larkin quickly informed the drug enforcement chief, but they were skeptical. They believed they were closing in on the plane and underestimated Cyrus the Virus Grissom's intelligence. With time running out, Agent Vince Larkin called for backup while eyeing the chief's sports car. Thinking that driving was a good option to quickly reach Larner Airport, William Billy Bedlam Bedford noticed a problem when he saw Cameron Poe's parole papers. They met in the cargo hold, and William Billy Bedlam Bedford, being ruthless, couldn't let a minor offender off easily. However, He underestimated Cameron Poe. After a cliffside confrontation, the combat helicopter caught up with the plane. They intended to take action, but discovered a problem. The plane didn't carry 30 prisoners but was an elderly tourist plane. They returned to their seats. Agent Vince Larkin arrived at the airport first. It seemed deserted, with no signs of life for miles. He hid the car in a building and then sought a vantage point. Unfortunately, the observation tower's staff was dead, indicating a problem at the airport. The plane slowly landed at the airport, nearly colliding with another small plane. The pilot, agile and quick, jumped out of the plane, narrowly escaping death. The plane veered off the runway, facing continuous obstacles. Eventually, a group of prison celebrities disembarked. Here, the drug lord would switch them to another plane, which hadn't arrived yet. The pilot of the small plane was also hot-headed, intending to teach the big plane a lesson, but realized something was amiss and immediately reversed course. Nathan Diamond Dog Jones wanted to execute a hostage but was stopped by Cameron Poe, who believed they shouldn't kill hostages until the plane landed. Nathan Diamond Dog Jones disagreed, but Cyrus the Virus Grissom issued an order, agreeing with Cameron Poe's logic. Everyone was busy working, but Garland Green took a different path, and no one dared to stop him. He arrived at a house and saw a girl playing with toys. Cameron Poe went to find tools and ended up in a warehouse. However, Johnny 23, observing from the tower, suddenly saw dust flying in the distance, indicating several cars were heading towards the airport. Based on the distance, it would take about 10 minutes to arrive here. Garland Green picked up a doll and sat opposite the girl, who smiled and shared her toys. Meanwhile, Cameron Poe was restrained by 3 men. Finally understanding their intentions, the drug lord didn't plan to take everyone, only his son, abandoning the prisoners here. With a silencer on, he thought his life was over when Agent Vince Larkin appeared, deadly and precise. Finally meeting Agent Vince Larkin, Cameron Poe prepared to return to the plane to save his friend. At this moment, Agent Vince Larkin said, "I've read your file. You're not a bad guy. You just had bad luck. I've talked to your wife and your daughter. If I don't make it, please tell my wife I love her. But I can't leave a friend behind." Leaving the handsome background, Agent Vince Larkin sighed deeply, fearing the most the man inside the plane. The prisoners hastened their pace as the police were approaching, everyone busy. But I was more worried about the little girl.
You take medicine?
Why do you ask?
You look sick. Are you sick?
I am sick.
Do you know he's got the whole world in his hand? Come on. In his hands, he's got the whole world in his hands.
Taking advantage of the situation, Francisco Sandino slipped away and boarded a private plane, much to Cyrus the Virus Grissom's frustration. However, just as they were about to leave, Agent Vince Larkin lowered the railing and was about to be set free, but had the misfortune of falling into the tiger's trap. Watching Francisco Sandino deceive everyone, Cyrus the Virus Grissom took the cigarette butt and showed that deceiving a deadly virus must lead to this end. Back in the plane's cargo hold, Cyrus the Virus Grissom saw William Billy Bedlam Bedford's body and then searched for weapons, preparing for a big battle. After setting up the tactical plan, the fugitives initiated their action. After hearing explosions, Garland Green and the girl disappeared, with cups shattered on the table, leaving him bewildered. The prisoners launched their attack, rupturing the prepared tracheas and delivering a fatal blow to the police. However, Johnny 23 did not join the fight. Some things were more important to him, and he couldn't stand it anymore. Outside, there was continuous artillery fire and machine gun strafing, but this guy, Cameron Poe, clung to the plane, preventing the prisoners from escaping. When Johnny 23 was about to succeed, Cameron Poe said, "Don't treat women like this." The prisoners successfully defended themselves and prepared to evacuate immediately. However, a combat helicopter arrived, and everything seemed too late. The plane left amid the gunfire, with a rope unexpectedly caught on a stone pillar. The captors kept firing, shattering the stone pillars, but the iron spears hooked onto a garage, and after some tugging and pulling, the iron spears coincidentally hooked onto the sports car. This amazing scene took place. The drug enforcement officers failed to stop the plane, but the chief saw his identical sports car take off with the plane. As the plane passed the observation tower, it pulled up its nose, and the sports car crashed into the tower. The car detached and fell to the ground, but the license plate was clearly visible. It was the drug enforcement chief's car. The plane flew off into the distance, leaving us worried about the little girl. Encountering familiar faces again, this guy was still running, while a celebration began on the plane. Cameron Poe's secret was discovered, angering Cyrus the Virus Grissom. Not only was he deceived by the drug lord, but a traitor also appeared on the airborne prison. Cyrus the Virus Grissom grabbed a female guard. Just as Cameron Poe stood up, Baby Odell stood up and said it was all his doing. He was then shot by Cyrus the Virus Grissom. Cyrus the Virus Grissom read the letter and knew the traitor was Cameron Poe. At that moment, fighter jets arrived. Despite Agent Vince Larkin's shouts, the plane was riddled with bullets. Garland Green remained calm. He seemed unaffected by the situation. Cameron Poe began to fight, from the tail of the plane to the cockpit, to prevent the missile launch. Agent Vince Larkin used the plane to shield himself from the chief. And while Cyrus the Virus Grissom was distracted, Cameron Poe took control of the cockpit, the whole plane, and successfully communicated with the fighter jets. Through communication, the plane was to land at Las Vegas Airport, but there was an engine failure. The prisoners all took their seats, prioritizing their own survival. The plane didn't meet their expectations. It smashed into a large guitar at the casino. It skimmed over the streets of the gambling city, unable to reach the airport. Instead, it landed randomly, crossing several streets. The wings of the plane were shattered after hitting several objects, and it crashed into a pool outside the casino. Cyrus the Virus Grissom saw an opportunity and had to kill Cameron Poe before he died. However, fate had other plans. No one could have expected the plane to be split in half, smashing most of the casino's items before coming to a stop. Police cars arrived one after another, surrounding the prisoners, and the hostages were finally rescued. Baby Odell survived, and perhaps after serving his sentence, he might have a chance for parole. However, with many prisoners missing, Cameron Poe was expecting to see his wife and daughter but instead saw Cyrus the Virus Grissom. Cameron Poe and Agent Vince Larkin began their pursuit. What followed was an exciting car chase scene. Cameron Poe managed to grab onto an ambulance, while a motorcycle accelerated and took down Nathan Diamond Dog Jones. He fought with Cyrus the Virus Grissom, and at the same time, Agent Vince Larkin found an opportunity to get into a car. Cameron Poe stabbed Cyrus the Virus Grissom in the calf, engaged in a fight, and after a few moves, handcuffed him to the fire truck. Agent Vince Larkin filled the driver's compartment with water, causing the driver to lose visibility and control. Cyrus the Virus Grissom's situation was quite tragic. He hit various public facilities along the way, and after the handcuffs came off, he hung on a power line. As the fire truck was about to crash, Cameron Poe jumped off the car. For Cyrus the Virus Grissom, the previous events were not fatal. He was carried by a conveyor belt to this point, where a large iron block was above him. Casino money flew everywhere, and in the pool in front of the door, the little rabbit doll that was supposed to be given to the daughter was found. All of this marked the end. He shook hands with Agent Vince Larkin, and the police found Garland Green's toy, but they didn't know why it was on the plane. Cameron Poe looked across the street and saw a familiar face. He slowly walked towards Trisha Poe, the wife he had longed to see, and the daughter he had never met. Cameron Poe was also the father his daughter thought about every day. The family hugged each other happily, in the hearts of his wife and daughter. Cameron Poe was never a prisoner but a great hero. The airborne prison ended in happiness. Thank you for watching. I am a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel. See you next time.